All right, welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about renewals, technology trends, and trusted partners. I'm Russ Slifer. I'm the CEO of Black Hills IP. I had the pleasure of being the Deputy Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office before this role. So I'm happy to moderate today's discussion. We're going to be talking about renewals or annuities or maintenance fees. They go by different terms, often associated with different jurisdictions, but for today, let's just call them renewals. And a little bit of background about renewals before we get into our program. Each country has their own laws regarding renewals. So different countries have got different amounts. The amounts may be consistent or they may increase over time. They may also be dependent on the status of the owner. So for example, in the US, a small entity versus a large entity have different fees. The timing on the fees also vary from country to country. So they may only kick in after a patent is issued, or they may be during the pendency of an application. In addition, different jurisdictions only allow some people or a certain class of people to pay for the renewals. For example, in China or Japan, you have to have a local agent make the payment for you. In the US, we think of maintenance fees because the patent has been issued, and then there's a fee due at 3.5, 7.5, and 11.5 years after the patent issues. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. And a question that comes up is, what is the purpose of a maintenance fee in the first place? So the most obvious purpose for a maintenance fee or renewal is to generate revenue for the patent offices. We can think of it as a tax. Many of us have thought of it as a tax on the ownership of the issued patent. But there's also a second component to it, and it's kind of a public policy component as an initiative or an incentive, I should say, to have the owner of the patent make a decision whether they want to keep the patent or abandon it, in essence, dedicating it to the public. So you might see, for example, in the US, each time each maintenance fee gets more expensive, and the purpose there is to incentivize the owner to make that hard decision. So because of the complexities of different jurisdictions' laws, the amounts, the timing, most organizations, most companies and law firms choose to work with a payment service company, such as Patrick's or Black Hills IP. We're going to introduce both of those to you today. Now, many inventors or organizations that have small portfolios of patents tend to choose just to pay the maintenance fees, the renewals as they come due, because they have a small portfolio and most of the portfolio is of value to them. However, companies that have a larger portfolio need to prune or make decisions on which patents they want to keep, because if they keep all of them, and from experience I can share, it starts to eat up a large portion of your annual operating budget for a legal department. So making those decisions of what to pay, what to keep, is necessary, and we'll talk a little bit about that today too. So our speakers today are going to share their perspectives on the renewal process. And first, hopefully, we have David Joyle. He's the Vice President of Legal at Coty, and he's going to share some information about Coty, the company. You may not know the name of the company, but you certainly know their products. He's going to explain how he manages renewals at the company, why he chose to work with Black Hills IP Renewals, thoughts about managing his operation through this pandemic. Next, we're going to have Tom Marlowe. Tom is the Chief Technical Officer at Black Hills. He's also the President of Black Hills Renewals. He's going to share some information on the technology that's been developed to help patent owners, companies, law firms pay renewals, manage their operations. And finally, hopefully I don't mess up her name, Karen Carvling-Soholt is the head of global sales at Patrick's. And she's going to share with us information about Patrick's and some of the trends she is seeing in the marketplace. So right now I'd like to turn it over to David. I don't know if David's been able to join us yet. If not, then I'm going to pass the baton to Tom and he can share with us his thoughts, and we'll get David as soon as he can join us.
Sounds good. And thanks, Russ. One of the topics that Dave was going to, and hopefully will be discussing, is the use of renewals decisions for M&A work, which he's been involved in a decent amount in his position. And it is public that Cody's working on a divestiture of their professional beauty product line, and he is in a meeting on that topic right before this webinar. So it's probably just going over a little bit, and he's got a pretty good excuse is what I'm getting at. Yeah, so I'll jump into a little bit of, when it comes to annuities, the technology behind the service is important. And there's three critical pieces. Justin, if you want to go to the next slide. The first is data integrity. This is important because the data is important. Data integrity means having good data to calculate your annuities correctly. When it comes to data around the matters in your portfolio, especially when talking about annuity calculations, what you might think of as a belt and suspenders approach is best. So leveraging client data alongside public data. So here you have the best of both worlds, where public data can fill the gaps in the private data, and where client docketing system data can help fill in anything that's not otherwise available publicly. And then also making sure that there are good processes in place and systems to ensure that that data is up to date. At the end of the day, the data is critical because the calculations are critical, and you want to make sure that you have that in a system that you're working with. The next piece is workflow. And the workflow means being able to make decisions, to make payments, to run invoicing on my schedule or on your schedule or the schedule that you're working with at your company. Depending on how budget is managed, I might want to make monthly, quarterly, maybe even yearly decisions and payments. Sometimes budget opens up in a given month and I want to cover some of those annuity costs. Sometimes I need to push things out because it's been a high spend month otherwise. And I want to be able to understand what the consequences of pushing things out may be. Maybe I have a colleague that I need to assist in some of the decision-making or approvals as part of the process. How can I share information with them? How can I get feedback? How can I work that into the workflow? And can I make some, say, like preliminary decisions that are flagged to come back to? The flexibility in the workflow through a system is important in order to really maximize the time on hand. And finally, you've got decision-making. Well, and really analysis is the key piece to drive decision-making. Analytics for analytics' sake, I think is not necessarily good enough. You want to think about more than just the pretty charts here, but what can be used to make good decisions relatively quickly, and also determine which of those decisions maybe need a little bit more research. Ideally, you use the analytics to drive your set down to a much smaller subset to dive into in a little bit more depth. Okay, so on the next slide, when it comes to decision making in a mature portfolio, especially when you're talking about one with some international reach, it's not uncommon for annuities to make up 20–30% of an annual budget. Like Russ mentioned earlier, this can easily start to chip away at what you have to spend on new filings or ongoing prosecution, clearance searches, any of these other also important things within the budget. Having a good process here is important, and how that process takes time is important. We've all heard that time is money, but when it comes to budget, money is also money. I hope everyone's taking notes on that giant piece of insight. The key to having good and easily digestible information that can be used as part of a decision-making process is simple, straightforward analytics. And annuity decisions really, what you want is something that is informed, thought out, and something where you can get in, make your decision, and make sure that the impact of that decision is, I guess, well considered, right? Because while budget is an important piece of this, we all know that the protection of your technologies is also a very important factor. Okay, so getting down to it then, on the next slide, good annuity management starts with an understanding of strategy. Of course, this includes IP strategy, but that ultimately rolls up to business strategy. If you've heard me talk analytics before, or read some of the things that I write, you've heard this point before. IP doesn't live in a vacuum. It supports business strategy. An integral piece of this is budget. What is the budget? What is the business strategy? How do the decisions around portfolio management fit with those elements and kind of within those bounds? Once that's in place, there are a few key pieces to the workflow. The first is understanding timing. So when do decisions need to be made? When is budget available or not available? Who needs to be involved and what will it take to get their input? What are my deadlines? What are my due dates? What are my final due dates? Having a system that can provide all of this information quickly and readily. What can be extended? And of course, we know extensions come at a cost. So if you have to go into, say, grace period on a renewal, what is the cost of that? Which actually brings up the next category, which is understanding costs. And this is really, how much will these annuities run me, right? What are even worth my time to review? Having the ability to filter out the low cost and filter up the high cost so that I can forget about those low cost ones that are probably not even worth the time that will be taken to make a decision, and focus my decision-making time on the high cost ones and kind of chipping my way down from there. Understanding these costs is important, but of course, then the next piece of the puzzle is weighing them against value. So understanding value here is the final workflow category. And it's, unfortunately, it's the most complicated. Of course, it's loaded and can vary by the user. Analytics come into play by helping break down the portfolio, though, that can help, I guess, speed up an otherwise complicated process. And the best bet here is to tier it. So use data to get a high level view. And at a high level, we might take a look at, say for a particular annuity decision, how large is the family? What countries am I protected in? What markets? forward and backward citations, tags, those types of things, internal categorizations to help at least identify the ones that should be worth a more deep dive into the detail. And that's a second part of kind of getting a final value determination, where you're going to have to take a look at claims, you're going to have to take a look at specs if it's pending, if there's anything worth maintaining from a continuation perspective in order to make the right decision. And having a system that can put all of that into one place so you don't need to jump around is important. And, you know, part of what we at Black Hills IP Renewals work to build. Then, of course, having a place to record those decisions so that you don't have to rebuild them every time, in some cases every year, for analysis purposes is extremely helpful. So in a nutshell, these are the processes and technology that make sense to have in place in order to make the workflow easy and really help manage a portfolio well. And a lot of what we've worked to build into our systems over here.
Well, Tom, that's a great overview of some technology that helps manage renewal annuity decisions. But let's talk to Karen a minute and find out how Patrick's has built its organization and its network of payment agents around the world, and learn how we work together. Karen?
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Karen, and you did pronounce my name pretty good. So good for you, Ross. So I'm starting out to introduce Patrick's, the company I'm working for, and then talk a little bit about the trends that we see on the market today. And lastly, I would like to give some advice. If you're choosing an annuity provider, what kind of questions should you ask them, and what should you think about to get a good one? So on the first slide here is Patrick's is a company that provides an IPMS solution, an IP management solution for corporates and for IP law firms. And we were founded in '93. And from the beginning, we did not offer any kind of services. But in 2006, there was many clients that asked for, you know, could you please assist us with payment services? So 2006, Patrick's IP Services was founded. And that was seen merely as like a service to existing clients, nothing that was sold or marketed or pitched to the market as a whole. That has changed a bit the last few years. And our PIPS, as we call the Patrick IP Services, provides annuities, renewals, recordals, and administration work or tasks. Our main office is in Göteborg in Sweden. That's the headquarters. But we also have an office in Fairfax, Washington, D.C. And I would lastly say on this point that we have highly IP skilled staff. All of us have a background either from a law firm or from a corporate in dealing with IP. So how do we work? Well, we are agnostic, technology agnostic. So we offer our payment services to Patricia users. Patricia is our software, but we also offer our services to non-Patricia users. And we invest a lot of money in IT to ensure that we have a seamless integration with different systems and good data transfers, because automation is what the market wants to see, of course. Payment instructions can be given through our web portal, digital file exchange, or different APIs. And as I said, we are super convinced of the fact that the client should choose what system to use and what provider to choose for payment services, because that might not always be the same. It's not like one solution fits them all. So we try to tailor-made solutions to meet all our clients' needs. And I said on the next slide that we didn't start off as offering this service. We only took care of the incoming requests. That has changed a bit, but to be honest, we still work a lot with incoming requests. And we are a small provider compared to the big ones, but as you can see by our numbers, we have grown tremendously the last couple of years. And the numbers of payments, so it's not the numbers of cases we manage in our system, that's a lot more. You know, every case is not paid for in an annuity every year. And we expect to continue to grow rapidly this year too. So the trends that I see on the market, and especially now, I would say in the Corona era or Corona days, is that a lot of clients wants to benchmark their prices. We get a lot of requests, RFPs, and so on regarding annuities. And I think it's because everyone tries to say where they can save now. They are afraid of having to let staff go. The sales pipe, the orders are not coming in. The whole global economy is facing seriously problems now due to the Corona. And one thing that is quite easy to change is a provider of annuity services and renewal services. I mean, it's not rocket science. You have to be careful, you have to follow the secure process, but it's doable. It's way much easier to change annuity provider than to change an IP management system. That takes more time and involves certainly more people. So that's a trend. Back to the other slide. Yes. The other trend that I would like to point out is that the buyers are super educated nowadays. When I got familiar with the IP renewal business about 15 years ago, when you received an RFP, they ask for the service fee, they ask for the official fee, but you know, that's pretty much it. And nowadays, all the buyers knows that, you know, you have to ask more questions than that. You have to ask, do you pay directly to the patent offices? What kind of markup do you put on the foreign exchange rates? Where do you use local agents? Who are they? What do they charge? The nitty-gritty details are there, and the buyers are so very educated in what we do. And I think that's good for the business, of course. But that's certainly a trend. And another trend is the efficient workflows. They want automation. They want to have IT support, because even though it's not rocket science, you know, it's payment of annuities, everything could go wrong. And if anything goes wrong, you lapse a case and you're out of your patent right. And that's nothing you want to be facing. So you want the support of good system and workflows and processes like Tom talked about before. And I also seen that that's even more important now during Corona days, because everyone is working remotely. So they need that kind of support. It needs to work. And the last thing, the personal touch, the IP renewal business is consolidating. The big players are acquiring small independent, like Patrick's, for example. We are not bought by anyone. We are still independent. I think that's good because everyone doesn't like to be served by a gigantic payment provider. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I think it's great when they know, okay, Jessica is handling our cases. We know who Jessica is. There's an email to a person and so on. So I think that many of the requests we get from Patrick's is because they want to feel like a big client with a small provider rather than a small client at a big provider. So that's also a trend. So what should you think about if you are considering to move or change or benchmark prices with a new provider? Well, you should check if the provider pays directly to the different PTOs where that is possible. If you do that, you can save a lot of money on those payments. You should check how they deal with digital transfers, automation, etc. Is it secure? How do they validate data? Everything like that, it's a must in an RFP. The flexibility is also important. It should not be our way or the highway. Every client has their specific needs, and how flexible are you? it goes with, you know, reminders. When do you have to take a decision to pay or not? Everything. Check that. Skilled staff, high IP knowledge. I think that is also very important, that you work with someone that really knows the business and they know the consequences of something going wrong. And Bruce, you talked about the global network of agents, and yes, it's the case that in all countries you cannot pay directly to the patent offices. Then you have to go through a local agent because the legislation in that country says so. And how do you choose those global agents? How do you manage that network properly? How do you make sure that no errors, or that they are really good at what they are doing? Make sure that you ask about that. How did you choose your agents to pay? What kind of procedures? Do you have a contract with them? You should go for that because they are your representatives in those countries. So it's important to ask about this too. And the data quality checks. Where you're giving your portfolio to a new provider, make sure that there is a validation process. What dates do they check? Are we sure that nothing will, you know, go lapse or something will go lost? How is that process? And then I call them the add-ons, the budget list, the forecast, etc. These things that are so important, are they included? Can I call my key account at that company and ask for a forecast for next year? Will they charge for that? Will they be quick in sending you that? All those kind of things that are not pure payment services, but it makes a heck of a difference if it's working or not. Ask about that too. And the last thing on this slide, I think the transparent pricing, and that is a trend, and it's continuing to do that, to be so, because everyone wants to know exactly what they are paying for. They should not settle with an invoice with a big lump sum in the end saying this is what you have to pay. You should know exactly what is the local agent fee, what's the official fee, service fee, etc. If you understand that kind of pricing, then you can start benchmarking for real, because we all use different terms and cost types and so on. But take a look at the total. So if you follow those few points when you issue an RFP, I'm pretty sure you're going to choose a good provider. And that was it for me.
Great, Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're still waiting on David to join, so we're going to continue on, but I do want to let our audience know that if you've got questions, please submit them. I'm getting some questions, and we'll work through as many of those as we can. Tom, I'm gonna address this one to you first.
Sure.
And it's really just from me. I think our audience would be interested to know. You know, we're doing this joint webinar with Patrick's and Black Hills. Maybe you could just take a moment and explain how the two companies work together, kind of as a trusted partner.
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good one. So Black Hills and Patrick's have been working together for a number of years now. Black Hills has spent a lot of time building a lot of that interface, workflow, data integrity, those pieces that I talked about in my portion of the discussion. But what's equally, if not more at times, important is what's happening after the decisions are made. And we start to process the payment of those annuities. Having a system and a network to get annuities paid, whether it's in the European Patent Office or it's in the South African Patent Office or the Patent Office in Kazakhstan, we need to have a network to be able to tap into to make sure that those payments get paid in a timely manner. And rather than try to build that out from the ground up, Black Hills IP Renewals was able to work with Patrick's to leverage those Patrick's IP services that Karen, you mentioned you had put together to be able to kind of sit right next to the team that you've got and the systems that you have in place. And so we have basically a connection between our systems and the Patrick systems to be able to have, when we want annuities to be processed, we communicate them over to Patrick's, they get processed, we get confirmations back, and it turns out to be a really outstanding relationship because it allows us to focus primarily on our customers while knowing that we have a really strong infrastructure on the other side.
Thanks, Tom. I got a question that came across, and I thought it's a good one, especially following on Karen mentioning that one size doesn't fit all for everybody, or the cup of tea. The question really relates to what is the smallest portfolio, or the number of payments per year, however you want to quantify it, that Patrick's or Black Hills will handle. Karen?
I couldn't say that we have a limit or an absolute minimum. We have mostly mid-size or bigger clients, but we haven't set like you have to have at least 50 renewals per year or something. No, we don't have that limit. Tom?
Yeah, no, I think the smallest one that we currently have is probably 0 per year in certain years. We do a lot of work with law firms, and a number of the law firms that we work with and partner with will send over clients large and small. And we've done a lot with our workflows and with our people to be able to be comfortable handling a client that has tens of thousands of matters in their portfolio, down to the single inventor that just got his first issued US patent and won't have a maintenance fee due for another 3.5 years. So this year, that inventor may have 0, and next year that inventor may have 0, but we've got their data and it'll be ready for them when that fee comes up. So,
Karen, a question on Patrick's, and you said you were agnostic to the IP management system that your customers are using. Could you talk just briefly about data verification or the data exchange with other systems outside of Patricia?
Well, I would say verification. We have tools in Patricia software that we are using Patricia ourselves, our own software, to keep track of our own deadlines, and we have country law and the country law rule engine, etc. And we work with this agent of network, and we know them very well. Most of them, if not all, are using Patricia themselves, so we communicate easily with them. Or, around the globe. We have electronic validation tools that gets and get the data from private pair and features like that. And we have a team around 15 people in Göteborg dealing with the renewals every day. And we have a very secure process. And I forgot the question. Did I answer it?
Well, part of it was just since you're agnostic to other systems, the question was just data exchange with those. And I think a lot of that depends on whether the IP management systems provide APIs to third parties or.
Yeah, Excel, XML, APIs. We try to find a solution that fits for the client to work in the system they have, and we should try to adjust. And until now, that has gone very well. We have good IT people at our company. And we have good partners.
Well, I'll second that and say, as the maker of a system that integrates with your systems, that having, and while we share somewhat of a base on the country law perspective, having the data validation that we do on our end, and then knowing that there's essentially a second validation that happens once it's received on the Patrick's side of things. I mentioned belt and suspenders earlier, and it's another great example of that, knowing that there's, you know, essentially expert services on the other side as well, really helps me sleep at night, and helps you know, really be sure that you've got a really sound process end to end.
So there's different formats, if you will, depending upon the organization. For large companies, well, even basically for any company with a portfolio, they're probably managing the portfolio through the legal department. I think David would have talked a little bit, and still hoping that he'll join us. But you know, when I was in house, everything was centralized in the IP department. We made all the decisions. Some organizations have that decision decentralized to their different divisions, maybe managed in one location. Now, law firms are different. Law firms have historically worked with an outside provider to manage the fees, and they just process all of their clients' work through that. There's a new trend where law firms are getting out of managing the renewals for a lot of reasons, often the margin versus the risk and everything else. So they're either referring all their clients to one service provider or providing a list of clients. So I've got a couple of questions along that line, and one is sent to me asking whether a law firm could negotiate a reduced fee for all of their clients if they're going to refer them as one, and the other is how do law firms, I guess, work with outside providers when they want to pass their clients to a trusted payment provider, yet know what's going on, if you will?
Karin, do you have any thoughts? Otherwise, I've got a...
Yeah, you asked if they can negotiate one service fee for all their clients. That was the question.
That was one, yeah. You know, can a law firm negotiate an umbrella price, you know, for all of their, and I know the easy answer is anything's negotiable in business, yes. But.
Yes,
yep.
Yes. Call me.
Yeah, and I'll echo that as well. It all depends on what kind of volume we're talking about, how the data formats are going to look. It's all part of the discussion, and we try to be pretty flexible with that type of thing as well. And Russ, there's a second piece of that question, and it's already escaped me.
Well, so if the law firm takes the approach that instead of picking one service provider and referring all of their, you know, either referring or just, you know, subcontracting, if you will, all of the renewals for all of their clients, but instead opts to let their clients choose their provider, how does the law firm still know that things are being handled? Because they, you know, often the client is a continuing client of the firm. They want to make sure they're treated well. They want to make sure things are happening, but they also don't want to micromanage their clients.
Yeah, well, actually, we got that question, me and Jessica, today. Jessica is the head of our renewal department from a Canadian law firm. And it was easy as we send a copy to you, so they know what's going on, and they happen to have Patricia too. So when we speak to each other's system, they will get that information, even though we are the ones facing the client. So there are ways to solve that too.
Yeah, yeah, and we get that a lot with the law firms that we work with. And so what we'll do is we can set up the firm in a number of different ways. If they have like an internal annuity manager or somebody who wants to be available for escalations or have some oversight, as long as the client gives permission, which they pretty much always do, we can allow someone at the firm to continue to have visibility into the client portfolios so that they can see if there's upcoming due dates. Sometimes we'll put them in an escalation path, CC them on urgent reminders, and just as a way to make sure, well, basically ensure that there's a kind of another route to getting decisions made as they approach.
By the way, we are recording today's program. I had a question if they get a copy of the presentation. Yes, we'll be posting that on the website for people to access. Got a couple of questions about pricing, and I know pricing is probably going to be a bit difficult to address in this format, because of course it all depends on what the portfolio looks like geographically, size-wise, etc. But one thing David was going to talk about a little bit is, the effect on the corporation of predictability, timelines, working within their budgets, and that was something that when I was in the corporate world was very important. So I thought maybe we could just take a moment and touch on that. Karen, you pointed out one of the trends is a more educated customer base that are asking the questions about currency fees and use of local agents and so on. And I think negotiating a price point up front is the way we've always done it, I guess. But that's kind of, the trend is getting away from that and more transparency. Let's share with me what the actual costs are, and then I can make a better judgment. I thought maybe I'd just throw it out there in general for a little more conversation on that.
Yeah, but that's true. If you know what you're paying for, you're happy clients. I think you don't want unpleasant surprises after an offer have been given and then the invoice comes. So the more transparent you can be as a provider, the more, or the happier clients you'll get. So it's easy, I think.
Yeah, and when it comes to predictability, especially around budgets, and I'll speak to this a little bit from my corporate days as well, being able to, I remember November would come around and I would be trying to figure out what is my annual operating budget going to look like for next year. And the kind of lack of data available on the annuities front. I could take a look at historical and take a look at my invoices from last year and maybe do a plus or minus 5% depending on how the year had gone. But obviously that's not very scientific or accurate a lot of times. So Black Hills IP Renewals, we made an effort to build simple and easy forecasting into our interface so that you can see, okay, what's next quarter, next year, et cetera, going to look at, maybe even break that down by business unit, by country, et cetera. If you've got all that data in the system, it's not too hard to break down to be able to get some useful budget information.
I saw a question here to me, I think, how often are your country law rules reviewed and updated?
That was
because
going to be my next question.
yeah, because also in the system we have the official fees for the IP rights. It's updated once a quarter, so 4 times a year.
Tom, maybe we could talk for a minute from a corporate perspective on portfolio pruning. And, I pointed out the policy reason why governments have renewals, and one of those is to encourage the dissemination of information and then the freedom of use of that patented technology when it's no longer highly valuable to the owner. So they're trying to incentivize, especially at the USPTO, you think about the third maintenance fee at 11.5 years for a large entity is a large sum of money. When I was in the corporate world, I didn't have a staff large enough to sort through the volume, make a educated decision, and then prune the portfolio until we ended up getting into economic downturns where you were forced to make that decision, and often forced to make that decision without the most information. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to date myself. It's been quite a few years since I was in that position. In the meantime, there's been an awful lot of data analytics, a lot of AI, a lot of technology that is there to help make that decision. I wonder if you could just touch on that for a minute about how the technology has been created to assist in that.
Yeah, so I can think back to when I used to do this in-house, and it would, I'd get my quarterly invoices from my then annuity provider, and usually it would come down to like the last week before a decision had to be made. And thankfully I had a paralegal working for me who was a lot more on top of the deadlines than I was at the time. I suppose I shouldn't say that as an annuity provider now, but it was the case. And he'd come into the office with a stack of paper and notes on each of the matters, at least each of the expensive ones. And we would sit down and just walk through them. What decisions did we make on other family members? How much is this going to cost? What markets? What products does this relate to? And we'd work through it. We try to now build that into the software so it's all in front of you. But, maybe who might be best to speak about this? I saw Dave joined on, and I know he's dealt with some of these types of issues in his practice at Cody. Hey, Dave.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, you bet.
And sure, be happy to just offer a little bit from I guess a user experience perspective on the Black Hills IP Renewals platform. I want to start obviously by saying thank you to having me here today. To also apologize for being late. I'm sure you may have referenced it. We seem to be one of the very few. It's a matter of public record, but we seem to be one of the very few companies right now that's engaged in active M&A. Which was just announced in our quarterly results on Monday. And for better or for worse, when we say active, I mean active. So it's that kept me on a few calls this morning. What I'd like to suggest, and tell me if I'm talking too long or too short, is that the issues that Russ and Tom just identified in the last 5 minutes, I've lived here at Cody. Just a little bit by way of background, and then I'll go through a couple of points on how Black Hills IPR has helped me. My background is that I'm a patent attorney. Obviously, I worked for about 4.5 years at a firm in New Jersey, Dave Pitney, and then another 5 years at Greenberg Traurig, and then took my first in-house position at Avon. I was at Avon for 4.5 years, and came to Cody in the summer of 2016 as their first patent attorney. And the reason that I came to Cody as the first patent attorney is that Cody had just announced a massive acquisition of 41 beauty brands from Procter & Gamble. So everybody from CoverGirl to Max Factor, Wella to Clairol to the Gucci fragrance license, Lacoste, all of these were coming into Coty. And Coty's always been known, you'd know Coty from Stetson or from Lady Gaga's perfume. It's always been known as a brand forward company. It still is. But some of the technologies that came into Coty with this P&G acquisition, especially in the oxidative hair care, coloration in the hair care spaces, where Clairol and Wella and Nioxid and Sebastian and System Professional play. These are very heavy IP spaces with lots of technical utility patents filed. The challenge that we faced as a company is coming in just as a deal was closing, we had to very quickly ramp up an infrastructure to deal with 10 R&D sites around the world, a patent portfolio of about 4,000 patents all in, of which 3,000 were utility, and an annual annuity budget bill that went from, let's say, $200,000 to $300,000 for legacy Coty, which had smaller brands like Rimmel or an OPI, the nail business, to now an annual annuity budget of plus $2 million. And especially for a legal or an R&D organization that weren't used to paying this kind of money, it was an immediate hit and an immediate source of tension with R&D and legal on how to manage this. In order to try to manage this, and Tom lived this with me back in late December of 2016, I was fortunate enough to work with, we had Schwegman Lundberg as existing counsel for Coty, and I was introduced to Black Hills IP. Again, I was a patent department of one, no paralegal support, no other patent attorneys, no patent agent, nothing. So having Black Hills IP as a back office was helpful, and that's how I learned about the Patent Buddy analytics platform and Black Hills IP Renewals. The reason that the marriage of all those technologies has been so important is that it's allowed us to do basically three things. I would say manage costs first, manage complexity second, and provide objective routes to decision-making third. I'll try to go through each one, and I'll stop after each point if there's any questions. Like I said, this is just my experience, but this is a great example of being thrown into the breach on something and finding a technology solution that's worked wonderfully. So the first one is managing cost, obviously. I go to a general counsel or a chief technical officer in a company and say, your patent annuity budget just went up by 400%, and that wasn't in the original business plan. That's an immediate problem. So how do we manage that? To Russ's point, I lived that experience at coming into Coty, where we had multiple business units that had been acquired over the years who had private law firms paying annuities. And all this was done on paper. The document was sent to you and it was a pay yes, no. Boy, do you remember what this patent is? What does it relate to? Around and around and around you go, and it's all in paper, and there's no central repository. So paying annuities was a horrible chore, given the amount of time that had to be invested to try to just get a sense of what this was. We had two advantages moving to Black Hills IP Renewals. The first one is fortunate enough to inherit a great history from Procter & Gamble on how they managed IP. And they tended to put IP together in terms of IP strategies, where every patent family was filed for a very specific purpose. And you knew why that patent family was filed, and you could assess as often as needed whether that patent family was still relevant to a business. Especially important in a business like the beauty business, where things change very, very quickly and often they're trend driven. So if you marry that with a technology like Black Hills IP Renewals, you can take those cases, you're paying a relatively low cost per annuity, and you can start adding on data analytics. The data analytics allow for prediction. So when our first question is, oh, how could we possibly get rid of that case? I'm on that case. I remember doing that case when I was head of antiperspirants and deodorants. You can have conversations that say, look, that's right. But if you keep this case, this is what it's going to cost you now. This is what it's going to cost you over the lifetime of the patent. This is what it's going to cost you if you continue to want to protect this patent on all these countries. Do you need a patent in Liechtenstein on this technology? Let's have that conversation with this objective data in front of us, and we can talk about it. So the cost prediction on an individual patent basis and on a family basis, this is one of 5 patents that protects this hair color chassis. It's rated as a blocking peripheral patent. I know from my analytics that it's not forward cited by our competitors. I know from my data prediction from Black Hills IP Renewal that the family is going to cost X amount of dollars. Here's what it would cost if I maintain it only in the US and Europe. Here's what it would cost if I maintain it in the US, Europe, and say the key manufacturing site of Brazil or Mexico that I know my competitor's working in. Let's put those three choices on the table, add them up in a spreadsheet or add them up in Black Hills IP Renewals calculations and run a cost model and then make some strategic predictions this way. That was hugely helpful to get us started off. The second one we dealt with is managing complexity. As I've kind of alluded to, and maybe lots of us are in the same space, Coty is a brand builder, but that also means that what Coty does and what many companies do in this space is that we will buy brands, we'll buy technologies from companies or from private equity companies, and we'll spin them off. So you've got patent portfolios coming in managed by multiple outside counsel using pen and paper to calculate annuities with no central database and no sense of what that covers. If you put all the patents in the Black Hills IP Renewals database, the advantage you have is that you can tag these patents. So for example, at the time I came in, you can tag whether this patent had to do with our consumer, professional, or luxury division, and you can split out a three-way budget for each of those divisions. You can tag by technology applicability. If you want to make a case for an IP tax box regime, for example, in the Netherlands or in the UK, and if one of those requirements is that you need to show broad applicability of a patent claim, in my industry, let's say the patent claim is applying something to scalp hair versus applying to an integument, which is the external surface of the body. If it's an integument, I can make a credible argument that those claims cover many of the areas that we play in: skin color, hair, fragrance, nail, and you can use that data to drive a story in terms of why you would keep this. Would you keep it for an IP box? And what you can conceivably cover for competitors. You can tag by M&A. As I said, I'm late on the call because I was on a diligence call a moment ago. Can I tag divest retain patents? Sure, I can. Can I then quickly run predictions on what the cost would be for maintaining the existing portfolio for both the divested and the remained entities? And by the way, if the deal changes tomorrow and I'm going to split the divest company three ways, can I then run that one by using different tags? I can, which is really helpful. We can tag by third-party obligations. Coty, like many companies, does much research in-house, but we also leverage third-party suppliers or innovation engines to develop IP. We can tag individual IP or families IP by licenses that are associated with that IP. And we can tag by relevance to competition, and we can do that by using the Patent Buddy analytics that are part of the platform to see who's forward citing this patent and have a real objective conversation about that patent's continued relevance in a given space. I'll stop there. Any questions so far?
Oh, David, it's great. And I want to let the audience know that even though we're approaching the end of the hour, we might go a few minutes over because your information is great, David. And of course, we don't want to cut off a customer when they're speaking. Please continue. We'll go 5 minutes over.
Well, let's do this. I'll be brief and be seated for more questions. I'll just cover that last point, which is really coming out of what we just talked about. That the power of this platform for me is that it provides objective routes to decision making. So like I said, you can evaluate your IP by forward citations, in addition to, for example, your P&G IP strategies, what it was filed for in the first place. You can evaluate the IP by how many cases were filed in that class in that year, and then think about subsequent activity. And lastly, you can provide cost predictability. The example I just used a moment ago is if you wanted to keep a non-core case in all the countries in US and Europe, US, Europe, plus a manufacturing country. COVID-19 is a great example where this platform is really important. If I need to provide a 20% immediate reduction in budget, let's model that a couple ways on my annuity budget and give it to the business to make some decisions and explain what they get for each level of spend. This tool allows you to do that, and it's tremendously powerful.
Well, thank you, David. That really helps kind of bring it to a nutshell of why this technology was first developed. And our focus at Black Hills is to enable that kind of management, that transparency, thinking through portfolio management, and then working with Patrick's as a skilled provider for those renewals helps us focus on what we do, and Patrick's focus on what they do. And so the partnership has been really good. We're speaking of which, we're going to have another webinar in a couple of weeks. We'll send out some announcements to talk about Patricia, the IP management system from Patrick's, and Black Hills IP and the services that we do, and how we're able to collaborate together through APIs to help our customers start automating data entry into those systems. I don't have any other questions. Tom, do you have any questions that you want to throw out to David or Karen, or frankly any of the panel the other way around?
No, I don't think so. But I do think I would echo what Dave was saying about being able to, when you have to make a 20% cut in your budget, being able to leverage a platform to help do that, coming from the semiconductor industry, which in a lot of ways is different from the kind of the skincare beauty industry, Dave, that you're in, but at least maybe in the cyclical nature, there might be some similarities. We had to do that all the time. And that got driven into what we built. And it's really nice to hear that it's useful more than just in theory.
Terrific. It's a great tool, and we're thankful to for the 3.5 years or so that we've had a chance to use it.
Thanks.
Karen, any closing thoughts?
No, I have no questions. And if you have any questions to me, you can always mail me, and that goes for everyone in the crowd now listening. I put my email address on that slide, kks@patricks.com. You're welcome to contact me.
Yes, please reach out. David, thank you again for joining us. We realize that your schedule is crazy right now, and we're glad you could hop on and share some thoughts with our audience. With that, I think we'll wrap up, and thank you for taking the time to listen to what we had to say. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.